dice swing, in particular the D20, something I talked about on a recent episode. Got some call-ins, we're going to get to them, but just in summary, my challenge was that quite a lot, I hear this, what I regard as maybe popular opinion or a popular misconception, that, you know, maybe in all cases the D20 is just this swingy die, and I'm challenging it because I use the D20 a lot, quite fond of it, and thinking, what is it I like about it? Well, on a straight roll with one D20, you've got a 5% chance of getting any number. If you stick with the 1d20, and whether you're player or GM, this makes it quite easy for you in design terms, getting your head around some probabilities, because you just got this simple percentage thing going on, and we all kind of like we live with percentages, and that's one of the reasons why I quite like D100 ideas. But what I was suggesting is, when you've got a binary situation, pass fail, there's no range of result, then regardless of the die, once you take the range of results away, so that there's no importance on anything other than the number you're trying to beat. Classic example, hitting a difficulty check, making an ability roll in D&D, and you've got to hit a certain DC, you either pass or you fail. So your D20 becomes like a kind of adjustable coin flip. That's all it is. It's a flip of the coin. Did you get your 15 or did you not? So there's no swing at that point. There's no swing. And that's just what I wanted to kind of highlight, really, because as I said in the episode, I never really saw it like that. And that makes you thinking, and you're kind of figuring out stuff just really, really simple. And I like a bit of simplicity in games. And I don't know if we always call that out. You know, you think of the D6 as being a bit simple, but the minute you get in a couple of die rolls, and arguably 5th edition complicates things a little bit with the idea of advantage and disadvantage. It's really simple to use, but actually the probabilities and stuff involved are not as simple as you may think. With a DC value that's in around the middle, the advantage, which way does it go now? I think advantage has more effect, and then at either end, does it have less effect? I can't remember now. See, there you go, I can't remember that. So that's already a bit of a problem for me. I'm not happy. But with that D20, pass or fail. So, like I said, you're forgetting about the fumble, you're forgetting about the crit. Just looking at that simple check, that ability check that I like so much, you've got a nice, people hate it, but I think it's elegant. That is an elegant solution to resolving your it's an elegant randomizer. Anyway, let's get to the call-ins. First up, illustrating my point a little bit, is Jason of Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Let's see what he's got to say. We'll follow on perhaps with Goblin's Henchman, and I've got Spencer calling in as well. So a nice little selection for you. I might drop in again at the end once these knowledgeable folks have said their bit.
Hey Colin, Jason here. Finished your episode 376 talking about the D20 being swingy or not. I do think it's swingy. Now, is it as swingy as a D100? No, it is not. But I think where the idea of swingy, non-swingy comes is compared to when you're rolling dice on a curve. So like 3d6, you have that bell curve, so you're more likely going to get those numbers in the middle of the curve more often compared to when you're rolling a single die and, you have 1 in 100 chance of getting anything on a D percentile, especially if it's a real D percentile, and a 1 in 20 chance on a D20. Now, here's my question for you, Mr. Collin. When you're using the algorithm and the dice rollers online, do they include the bell curve for 3d6? If you just put in that, that generator, do you have an equal chance of getting those numbers? If there's I guess they do it because you say roll 3d6. So never mind, I'm stupid. Math was never my strong point. But yeah, that's why it's swingy, because you have an equal chance of getting any number compared to 3d6 or 2d6 where you have bell curve. Also, in some D20 systems, you have degrees of success, just like you do in Call of Cthulhu with a D100. Now, do these degrees of success mean that, and when I say degrees of success, folks, I mean that some past results are better than other past results. So you can succeed at a roll, or you can have a great success at a roll, or you can have an outstanding success at a roll, and the more you succeed by, the better you do. In those cases, is it still swingy? I don't know. I guess it just depends on your definition of swingy. But I think most people can consider it swingy because of what I said, the bell curve when you roll multiple dice compared to not having a bell curve when you roll a single die. These days, I've come to enjoy the swing. I think it adds variety to the game, makes it more cinematic, so I don't mind the swinginess so much, but I'm weird like that. Anyhow, talk to you later. Great show.
Hi Colin, Goblin Henchman here. So I was just listening to your latest drive-by. Right at the end, you touched on the idea of, is a D20 swingy or not? And it's the topic. Swingy dice is something that's sort of interested me in the past, but I think probably you have to ask yourself a couple of questions here. Swingy as compared to what? And I presume you mean as compared to, say, 3d6 or something. Now, I think with this as well, it depends whether you're using the dice as a test or whether you're using the dice to determine an outcome. So, and to some extent, it only exacerbates the problem. So, if you're determining, say, damage, let's say you're a fighter in AD&D uses a two-handed sword that does 3d6 damage. So that's the same as like a stat roll. And invariably, he'll do damage in the range of 10 to 12-ish. Occasionally, he'll do a bit more, and very rarely, he'll do an 18. In fact, 1 in 216 will he roll an 18. Whereas if you rolled a d20, arguments, you just say, we'll ignore 1s and 2s and 19s and 20s. The chance of getting 18, is, well, about 5%. I know it's probably a bit higher actually because you've taken a couple of numbers off either end. But you can see 1 in 218 versus 5% means that you're much, much more likely to get 18 damage using a d20 than you are 18 damage using 3d6. So that's where you're using your dice to determine the value. Now, if you're talking about testing against a score, a target number, then I think it becomes interesting. And I did write an article once about this, and actually a YouTube video, which is, what was it called? What was it called? Let me pause it. Oh yes, that was it. It was something like ability scores, are you doing it wrong? So, as far as I know, there was when I wrote that article quite a long time ago, actually, a long time ago, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I was listening to a podcast, and there were two schools of philosophy when doing an ability check. There was one school of philosophy, which I'd always used at the time, which is using a d20, and generally you rolled equal or under, something like that. Let's just say for arguments it's under. And then one of the hosts on the podcast was saying, I always use 3d6. Or if I want to make the test harder, I use 4d6, something like that. And so I cranked through the numbers, and it's, from my point of view, it's very interesting because obviously the D20 ratchets up in 5-degree intervals. But again, 3d6 doesn't go in a straight line gradient increasing 5% intervals. It gives you that bell curve. So, for example, if you have a fighter with 18 strength, if you use a d20, he has, and you're doing, say, roll under, 15% chance of failure. Whereas on 3d6, he has 1 in 216. So a fighter with 18 strength using 3d6 will invariably never, ever, ever fail, or nearly never fail, a strength check. Whereas using a d20, he will fail 10 or 15% of the time. And that's quite a stark difference. This led me to postulate in this article that you should use a d20 when it's a mundane task which anyone could fail, say stock taking, say for intelligence, whereas you should use the 3d6 test when doing something which requires sort of genius or innate ability. So, for example, calculus. So, a genius will always be able to do calculus invariably, whereas someone with 3 intelligence will pretty much never be able to do it. So it sort of is a kind of quite stark drop off. So I don't know. I don't know if any of that rant has helped any ramble, but in a sense, you're right. I think you're touching on this idea that D20, if you're doing a check to pass, it doesn't feel less swingish because it's so linear. It feels like a straight kind of gradient. Whereas if you use something like 3d6, it feels more severe. But actually, the way to rephrase that is that the D20 is more swingy, but probably in the right way, in my view, because I think it seems a bit weird to have a fighter with 18 strength basically never be able to pass. Just as an aside, one of the things I discovered when considering swingy dice is that actually if you want to introduce, say, swing into a 2d6 table, don't use 2d6, use a d8 and a d4, because asymmetric dice flatten the probability curve and give more swing. So if you're using a 2d6 random table and you're getting a bit tired of returning goblins, say, because they're always in the middle, if you use a d8 and a d12, you'll get more of the periphery rolls. And just as one final aside, that article I wrote, Ability Checks You're Doing It Wrong, I wrote that a couple of years before it got published by Anne Magazine, before I had a blog. And incidentally, I sort of independently came up with the idea of advantage and disadvantage, although, of course, it was already in the mix from Wizard of the Coast, but I don't think it was well publicised at that stage. And I certainly didn't recognise its genius either at the time. I came up with the idea, but I was only getting back in the hobby then, and I don't think I realised its simplicity of how good it was. But anyway, this message is far too long, and I won't blame you if you if you don't use it. But just if it's for your interest only, that's fine. Cheers, fella. Hope all's go good with you and your retraining and everything, and general life balance thingy. Cheers.
So, Colin, is a D20 swingy? Well, only if you're comparing it to, say, 3d6, something with a bell curve, then you're talking about those extreme ends being much less likely, and you're going to be rolling more, say, average numbers. But if you set aside the idea of crits and think in terms of pass or fail, then saying a D20 is swingy is like saying a D6 is swingy, or saying that flipping a coin is swingy. Doesn't really make any sense at all. Just my thoughts. Cheers.
Well, come on, you knew it was going to happen. I've got to have the last word. Nah, seriously, I just wanted to step in just to say how much I appreciate those call-ins. I think there's some really good food for thought there. As you might expect, we haven't quite got a consensus we've sort of got a spread of opinion. Maybe the opinion was a little bit swingy. Oh dear, I couldn't resist. Big thanks then to the callers, Jason Connolly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Free For All, or Spencer of the superbly named Keep Off the Borderlands, and finishing up there, well, we was finishing up there with Spencer, and before Spencer we had Goblin's Henchman, old Henchy, coming in there with a bit of a curveball with that D4 and that D8. Before I go, there was one other thing. I wanted to make a couple of shout-outs, give a couple of shout-outs. One to Liren of Updates from the Middle of Nowhere. She was very excited to share with us recently that her home has finished and she's starting the process of moving from the old house into the new, setting up a garden, and it was all very exciting. Great news. I wish her and her family all the best with that, and look forward to hearing future updates. Talking of updates, got myself a little bit more up to date with some of Happy Whisk's projects. Talk of decluttering and setting up a studio, and then not setting up a studio, and she's been really excited about her kitchen project, and it just, listening to Ivy always brings a smile to my face. That's the Happy Whisk. Go check her out if you just kind of want an injection of enthusiasm and some advice on decluttering your space. Which brings me round to my final shout out. That's for my brother. You all know him as Arfed. He's been in an enormous help in finally helping me shift some board games from my board game collection, freeing up some funds to assist with my next year. I've got 9 months of unpaid teacher training, so all of those sort of pounds that have been freed up will go towards that, and I'll have space for the untold amounts of books that I imagine I'll be needing as part of my studies. So he spent a lot of time on that. It's a big help, and yeah, I'll leave you now with Mr. Henchman and his closing calling.
Hi Colin, Goblin's Henchman here. So I was really interested in Ray Otis's message about the Sherlock Holmes. In fact, I had this very same problem actually. I was going to buy this house and it was covered in this sticky residue, and actually I hired a guy from university to look at it. He had a doctorate and everything in it, and I remember asking quite clearly, "Doctor, what's on my house?" And he said, "Sherlock Holmes." And that was the end of it. Jeez.
And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.